So maybe I'll just repeat what I...
Yes, go ahead and repeat what you said, and that will be good for the video.
Yeah. So yeah, in the last few days, I like my mindfulness is pretty good. I see it developing the more I do it, which is great and enjoyable lots of times. But last few days is like I through this through this internal microscope I developed and the mindfulness to be with unpleasant stuff. I can look deeper and deeper instead of like distracting me all the time if something unpleasant comes up. And so yeah, that's my question. How to deal with this stuff that I can see now, and it's quite unpleasant and unsatisfactory at sometimes.
Well, that's good progress.
Mm,
As we were talking before we turned the video on, that in the beginning, the student has his mind wander away and he doesn't know it, and then he catches it. Later, he begins to catch it really often. Now you're at the stage to where you're beginning to catch things going on throughout your daily life, and uh, sometimes that comes up with, wow, look at that. All right. But in all cases, there are two ways of taking this stuff, and that is the ordinary way,
yeah.
the way of the loser, the way of the victim, or we can take it from the positive position of this too is one of the ways of saying it is grits for the mill.
Mm,
All right. Another way of really looking at it is, oh, this is actually skill development.
mm, mm,
That even in playing music or playing the piano, part of the skill development is to recognize wrong fingering and doing it wrong so that it can be straightened out. And even with the piano, sometimes we slow things down so that we can get the fingering right,
mm.
that we can't do it up to full speed. And that's why the practice got started in the first place. And now that that practice is well underway for you, guess what? It's just the same old story over and over and over again.
Mm.
And that is the more mindfulness or sati that you develop, which means the ability to remember to come back and be here now, plus the fact that it doesn't take so much effort anymore, that you kind of grease the skids, or that you've got used to it, or that, let us say, in this sense, is that you're up to the task.
Mm.
An example of that would be going to the gym and lifting weights. And the first time that you lift a heavy dumbbell, let us say a 10-kilo dumbbell, you pick, oh my goodness, and you set it over there. And now you can walk into the gym and you pick up that 10-kilo dumbbell and set it over just because it's in your way, and it's nothing to you. All right,
Yeah, yeah,
and but that's the fact that now you're recognizing, but your whole mind is full of 10-pound dumbbells.
yeah, and it's also like a bit like um, going to the gym for some time and increasing the weight, and after a year, still saying, "Man, it's still heavy," but that's the whole point, right?
Yes, but this is real progress. This is the state that the students walk through, and some of them have more trouble with it than others. And it all has to do with, can we muster up right attitude for this? And that when the students can't get right attitude in that development, in fact, I would say that that's where the Mahasi and the Ledi Sayadaw literature about the 16 stages of insight wind up having a depression where the student gets disgusted with the world But basically what he's doing is he's getting disgusted with his own mind.
Yeah.
And that's okay to get
Mm.
disgusted with it, because that's the best way of cleaning it up.
Yeah.
That that talking about it in the sense of a wound, the wound needs to be cleaned out so that it can properly heal. And yet it's painful in some cases to open that wound and clean it out.
Yeah.
But right attitude takes care of almost all of the pain.
Mm.
Almost all of the pain of opening those wounds and checking out to find out what's in there. Um, Now here's something that's really kind of important.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Could you turn the camera a little bit down because I only see half your face. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So the the point that I want to make about importance is that uh, on the noble path, once we begin to see suffering and no suffering and begin to work with feelings and the mind and that kind of stuff, we begin to really understand what is the path, which is this path of investigation. Um, and along the way, we begin to come to the conclusion that, hey, I actually do want to get out of suffering. Kind of almost like a first time or like a new insight. It's like, dang, I see what that stuff is. I don't want to have anything more to do with it. All right, I want out. I want free. I want clear. So what that means is that we begin to have a change of attitude about suffering, and in regard, I would say, to the kind of suffering that already by the time that we see it is into wrongdoing, or perhaps we didn't even recognize wrongdoing until later. And that this is one of the really important qualities of the Buddha Sangha, is the quality of the confession, so that each individual can purify himself. But the important part of the confession is, I ain't going to do that anymore.
Mm.
I'm going to relinquish that. I'm going to throw it out.
Yeah.
Kind of like, here's an example. If some fat guy or gal wants to go on a diet, and they really want to go on a diet, and they think about a diet, and they look at diet stuff, and then they go on the diet, but they don't tell anybody that they're on the diet, then the diet does not have much power and it will fail.
Mm.
But if that same person advertises that, hey, I am on a diet, this is it, this is real for me, you watch, I'm going to actually do this diet, then it's much more likely to be successful, partly because not that other people are looking, but it's the dieter himself is now beginning to look at himself the way that other people look at him, which is a way of looking at it from a compassionate perspective of who am I in relationship to other people, and that what we don't realize until we get kind of to the stage that you're at now is that many people can see stuff in us that we don't see ourselves.
Mm.
And so when we begin to see those things in ourselves and confess openly those things, people begin to look up to us. That's a kind of a lionly kind of thing. In fact, that's a very high character position. A person of high noble character is the one who admits that he's wrong.
Mm.
But now there's more to the step, because at the final, the fruit of the sotapan is when the student is so deeply enmeshed in the Dhamma that he takes great delight in it.
Mm.
That it's a delightful Dhamma. He really enjoys the not only the Buddha Dhamma, but the grander Dhamma that the Buddha Dhamma points to. All right, and so in that regard, even when the Sotapan who has the full fruit of Sotapan still does something wrong, he can admit it and admit it easily and happily and joyfully.
Yeah.
And that sometimes that easy, happy, joyful admission of guilt that comes with throwing things out can be seen by others as not genuine, because they don't understand that we can relinquish our own bad behavior joyfully.
Mm.
That we have to be dragged to the altar, so to speak. That the confession has to be dragged out of us
Mm.
because we don't really want to admit to wrongdoing. So I'm saying this to you because you're in that world now.
Mm.
That you can begin to see who you are through other people's eyes. You can begin to see who you are through, um, let us say, the cat fights, the stabbing in the back, the little lies, and the things that leak out to other people. You can become really much more aware of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And when you catch yourself at it, admit it openly.
Mm. Mm.
If you do that, then your progress on the path will be good.
Yeah. I, I I actually naturally the last few weeks started to do this, but yeah, it's great that you tell me that again, because yeah, like I told my girlfriend that whenever I'm at the whenever I'm at the laptop at home, she should ask me like if I'm doing something good or just wasting my time. And so she asks me now and then, and that's like yeah, it's helping me, and even if she's not asking, it's helping me in looking myself at my behavior and asking myself if that's yeah, it's if that's useful or not, what I'm doing right now.
Excellent. And it's part of the skill development.
Mm.
Because if we can easily and happily see our own faults and get over them, then that will be the secret to the eradication of the suffering. And that in fact it's exactly the same mentality that when we want to start from the very beginning of practice. Of aha, I saw you wandering away. And then aha, I see those feelings. Aha, I see those gestures. And now is aha, I see those deep motivations coming up that we've already talked about.
Mm.
Restlessness, comparing ourselves to others, wanting to escape
Yeah,
in that Arupa Raga part that we talked about, wanting to get out of it all.
yeah,
Uh,
I can see all of those through the like big time.
well, that's very good. Are you still using the timer?
Yeah, I do.
How often do you have it set for?
So right now I have set it to 5 minutes because you said last call I should
Wow.
like do it do it like all the time. But yeah, I will see if it's maybe better to do it every 15 or something, because otherwise it's like inflation, you know.
Yes, I would say that you could do it like that on the weekends or when you have plenty of time for yourself. Every 5 minutes would be really great. But if you're at work or you've got something to do or you're in contact with others, then you can shut it off or set it for a longer period of time.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do that because yeah, I mean, but it's like some days it's almost automatic, and some days I forget, but it's not that big of a problem anymore if I forget. I'm it's way easier to to enjoy like seeing it again, and yeah.
Uh huh. Have you ever heard of Thich Nhat Hanh?
Yes.
He's Vietnamese. He's gotten very old, like we all have from that generation in time. Um, he has a technique um, during the meditation time of ringing a bell, a very small bell with a high frequency, just hitting it one time. Ding, just enough for those people with a wandering mind to come back. And so I would say because of that, that 5 minutes should be the smallest amount of time, because that gives the mind a chance to
Yeah.
wander away back into its old system. So when that ding or your phone goes off, you go, come back here.
Yeah.
And that really helps the mind get focused
Yeah.
um, on a regular basis.
Hmm. Yeah, and what I also try to do is, we talked about that last time also, is in relaxing the gaze a little bit, so seeing more stuff around the object you're looking at. And if I can remember to do this when I'm working, for example, at my computer, that's also like I can, yeah, this just keeps me way more relaxed than like really focusing in on something, um, especially if it's something like if it's a hard problem I'm trying to figure out, and if I then like can remain in this more like spacious state of looking, then that prevents me from getting too tight. And yeah.
That's really, really great. That's an excellent practice. If it's possible, do that in front of a window so that you can project with your eyes and therefore your mind as far out and as far away from where you are as you can.
Yeah.
If you've got no window, then your projection is only a few feet, but with a window, you can
Yeah.
bring that out to maybe a kilometer or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and this also really like helps in not objectifying things and don't like feeling like so solid of a self. It's way more spacious then. Yeah.
Yes, at this level, this is a good place to introduce a teaching that I don't normally use. It's called the five aggregates. Have you heard of the five aggregates? The five aggregates are very, very similar and very close to the Satipatthana.
Mm.
And it's also very, very close to the early part of Paticca Samuppada.
Mm.
So in that, and here's the thing that's really interesting is that in the Satipatthana Sutta, these five aggregates are mentioned as something worthy of paying attention to, but they're not covered in the Anapanasati Sutta, not in the same way. And so we also look at the five aggregates in the sense of the Four Noble Truths. And in fact, the five aggregates fit very, very well right into the second Noble Truth, right in there with the Paticca Samuppada and the Satipatthana.
Mm.
Now, here's the interesting thing, is that the body and the feelings are kind of like the same thing as they are in the Satipatthana.
Mm.
And so now we have three new items. And these three new items are uh, consciousness and perception and sankhara. Now,
Mm.
at this particular level, the kind of sankhara that they're talking about is two out of the three kinds of sankhara that's in the Paticca Samuppada under the label of sankhara. Why? Because that third one is the body sankhara, and the body is already mentioned. And so the body and its own sankhara would be there. The other two kinds of sankhara, one would be learning at an intellectual level, all the way from the alphabet and the ability to read and our language and all of the definitions of all of the words and all of that kind of stuff. And that's stored in one area of the brain. And then the other kind of feeling, which is also a mental feeling, but in the Thai language, it uses the word heart rather than mind. And that this is the feelings that are associated with the cerebellum and the hippocampus, which are both in the back part of the brain. This is our emotional storage. And whether we like it or not, we feel the way we feel because we're in the habit of feeling that way.
Yeah. It's like wearing red tinted glasses. Everything seems red, right?
Exactly. And so these sankharas that are the built-up memory systems of both the language and the emotional feeling systems are put together in a kind of, let us call it a chemical mix, or maybe even a mental processor or a computer, so that when we get input from the senses, then we take all of this stuff out of the mind and do a process to come up with a label or some sort of understanding of what it is that we're seeing or feeling or looking at or whatever. And when we do not come up to a satisfactory answer, we want both more verbal more sensual input and more processing. Because we're dissatisfied with the answer, what that means is that the answer is already now a feeling, and the feeling is a feeling of confusion. And so in order to resolve that feeling of confusion, the mind wants to continue to work and to process. All right? That is also a kind of suffering. And so at the let us say at the higher stages, remember what we talked about was feeling, and we're already talking about one kind of feeling, and that's that feeling that is neither neither pleasure nor painful. It's confused. We don't know how we feel about something. All right, and that winds up when it's full blown as doubt, confusion, restlessness, and constantly trying to perceive things because we're in the habit of having that perception mechanism running on and on and on and on. All right. So this is why the Buddha recommends that concept of let the scene be merely the scene. Don't do so much processing. When you catch yourself processing it, move on to another object and just keep moving on. Don't continue to try to search out or figure something out. All right, so these are these 5 things, and it's perception. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. Perception requires the past. It feeds off the past. Everything from the past. And so if we stop doing too much perception, that means we can leave the past alone. Because we can't fix it.
Yeah.
Even the lion cannot fix the past. Sorry, it's gone.
Yeah. I think what it feels like for me right now is I am more and more in this state of not taking like so gross objects, but this also brings with it because it's not because it's new. It feels like some kind of balancing all the time, you know, because it's like I'm like kind of tiptoeing around it, and then
Yes, but by continuing to keep that balance, it takes effort in the beginning, but later the effort becomes easy. Once you're beginning to get skilled at keeping things balanced, and in fact, being at peace with oneself and being balanced like that are in fact two of the aspects of the 7 factors of enlightenment.
Yeah.
All right. So that's exactly what you're doing, and you're doing it correctly. Now, let me add a little twist to this. And the twist is that that which is consciousness, which is seeing or hearing or touch, is not you. The body is not you. Many people identify with the body. There are so many industries that are, from cosmetics to many kinds of surgery. Clothing industry is all because I am the body. And so when we recognize I'm not the body, then when we're making real progress, recognizing I am not the feelings. Because people they think that they're actually the feelings, but in fact, they also recognize that they cannot control the feelings, and therefore the feelings couldn't be a self at all because they're out of control. They're off doing their own thing. And when we bring them under control, they're still not me. They're just qualities of the brain and the way that the brain works. We also recognize consciousness is just merely the scene. It's the capability of the eye and the body and light and the object that we see and the registration in the brain that gives us sight. It's not me. It's just consciousness. Wow, and so many people think that everything is conscious. I'm not sure. I do know that living things have a better chance of being conscious than minerals. We see that plants often are conscious. At one level or another, you could say a light switch is conscious. Why? Because when you throw that light switch, it's smart enough to turn the light on. And so no matter what level of consciousness or how strong or soft or sophisticated it is, it's not a self. And that's hard for people to gain. That in fact in Hinduism, they teach that it is consciousness that runs from one world to the other. And also consciousness is that which the Christians think. Almost as if consciousness requires an outside world for sensual. Therefore, if I am dead and in heaven or something, I've got to have some kind of eyes in order to see. Otherwise, why be blind in heaven? All right, and so in that regard, they still see consciousness as I am consciousness. And throw in a couple of eyeballs, by the way. So now I am the body again.
Yeah.
All right. Now another thing that happens is people get attached to I am this Sankara. Musicians can fall into it when they are able to play a piano piece while talking to a young girl who's batting her eyes at the piano player. All right, and you just play right along. Why? Because the memory is built right into the body. And that memory for many sports, karate, and in fact, almost all of the martial arts, even down to Zen and the art of archery, is all about body training. And if we can utilize that, we also, with Anapanasati, are doing body training. But our training is not to make the body do something. Our training is to be sure that we know what the body's doing, that we take control over it. And so in that regard, many times martial arts would be a very good training. In fact, Zen and the art of archery made a major change in the 13th century when the shogunate unified Japan there was left with all of these samurais who were excellent archers, and that's about the same time that Zen came from China in the form of Zen, Japanese, but then archery and many of the other martial arts became spiritual arts in and of themselves. The one that's the best example is archery, with the idea that the archer does everything absolutely perfect with his body, and after he lets the arrow fly, he's not interested in the target.
Yeah.
He was more interested in did I shoot right, not did the arrow hit its target. And that's quite amazing, because
Yeah.
that's part of what our process is also doing.
Mm-hmm. I have to get the cable real quick. 1 second.
All right.
Right.
All right. So now we have seen that I am not the body, I am not the feelings, I am not consciousness, and I am not all of my old memories and my old bad habits. That those things, the tools that were manufactured throughout life are still tools, they're still skills to be used,
Yeah.
but they are not me. They are merely skills to be used. And perception is certainly not me, because I'm perfect and my perception is crap. And we make a lot of mistakes because we misperceive. In fact, I really got a surprise one time, and I'll tell you this story because I was into music. And that some university bands will have a fiberglass sousaphone because it's a really big instrument. The old ones were all made out of brass and very heavy.
Yeah.
So now I'm walking down the street and I see a guy carrying a white fiberglass French horn. And it made no sense to me. And all of that circuitry started going off, confusion, 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 like that, because they don't make French horns out of fiberglass. They make them out of brass. I get close enough to him to recognize he's carrying a white Frisbee, and in his white Frisbee is white tennis shoes. And so all the tubing of the tennis shoes was seen by this little musician boy as the guts of a French horn, and the Frisbee was the bell.
Yeah.
That's what perception does.
Mm.
That we try to make sense out of things. We try to match patterns. If I had been a sports dude, I would have seen a Frisbee and tennis shoes immediately, but oh no, I'm a music dub.
Yeah.
A sousaphone carrying.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's what I'm getting at, is perception is not who we are.
Mm.
Perception is a mechanism in the brain of trying to make patterns, trying to make sense out of something. But in fact, when I use the word pattern, I'm more correct, because in fact, humans are not truth-seeking machines.
Mm.
We are not that. We are pattern matching machines.
Mm.
And that Frisbee matched a pattern in the brain.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's what perception is. And there's many, many thousands of cases of mistaken identity. The courts are full of it, as well as false and manufactured memories.
Mm.
None of that stuff is reliable. All right, so in fact, the Buddha is quite correct to say, hey man, it's a whole lot better to hang out in just the senses themselves and not do a whole lot of trying to figure stuff out.
Mm. But this also means that, like, end of suffering is as good as it gets for a human, right? Because further than that, he isn't just built to like, I mean, like in terms of of knowing the truth, there's not really a way, because we make the patterns, or we search for objects, right? So there can only be a truth known which makes sense to us.
Or it matches our patterns.
Yeah.
And we call it making sense, where in fact all we're doing is matching patterns. That in fact, look at the word making sense, and we recognize that what we're saying is the pattern inside the brain or the mind that has been perceived and manufactured matches what is sensed, which means matches what's on the outside world. Okay, and so in that regard, we're trying to do pattern matching, of matching what's inside the mind with what's actually out there.
Yeah.
And we're not very good at that.
Just good enough to build some houses and make a comfortable living.
Yes, exactly. To be happy, to be comfortable, to be content, and to know how to spread that joy to others.
Mm. Yeah.
That we begin to have an obligation. There is a noble obligation to the Dhamma. But it can only be shared when it's worth sharing.
Yeah. So I really have to get clear of this thing first, right?
Well, it's worth sharing when you already have joy. That's the place that we start.
Yeah.
And so sharing our joy with others is exactly the right place to go. And you can see that the joy that you've been developed. Go ahead.
Sorry, you can share it if you don't have it, right? You first have to have it, and then you can share it.
Yeah. That's right. So, you can tell that the joy of the path, which is in so many suttas and yet not really taught well in Western Buddhism. Look at how many honors it has. One is that of the Anapanasati, it's one of the items on the list of Anapanasati. Of the 7 factors of enlightenment, it's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment.
Yeah.
As it comes to the Four Noble Truths, it is in fact one's right attitude. And so it's really that important. So once we recognize that joy is a major part of the path, then we can recognize that whenever we're sharing joy, we're actually sharing the Dhamma.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any questions about the 5 aggregates we've talked about today? The body, the feelings, the consciousness, the sankhara of memories, of the memories of emotions, and the memories of language. In fact, the word that the Buddha uses is vocal, and once you understand vocal down to its root level, you recognize dogs have a language. It's probably universal. The kind of language that I see here in Thailand is exactly the same kind of language that they have in the United States. They know how to smell butts, they know how to stand still, they know how to wag their tails, and it's a huge language that they have together. Well, that's where our language started. Was down at the level we were mammalians, that the reptilian brain is not language oriented, it's completely feeling oriented. So language is stored up here, but feelings are stored in the back, in the cerebellum. In that regard, the mind has to do a whole lot of grabbing and putting together. You can see all those hard drives moving and all of that memory being accessed to process all of that stuff. So, and the best part of it is not me. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
So perception is not self. Sankhara is not self. Consciousness, not self. Feelings, oh my goodness, no. And the body, not a chance. When we recognize that, that's what exactly is, in fact, the point of the Four Noble Truths, is to recognize there is no self there that needs to be guarded and protected. And that our right noble view now is bigger than my own selfishness. Now my noble view has to do with the responsibility of taking care of a grand audience.
Mm. Yeah.
And we take on that responsibility most happily. So do you have any questions?
I think not right now.
All righty. Well,
But
let's call this an end, and we'll see you later. Thank you for listening.
yeah, thank you for your kind advice as always.
May you enjoy the benefits of your labor.
Yeah.
May you be free from suffering, my child.
I already reaped the benefits big time, I think, yeah. All right.
All righty. Bye bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.